Was that badass or what? So, last video you saw me put the sand tires and wheels on, and it got me thinking about some of the complaints I'm hearing about this car. I got a deeper dish wheel all the way around, extra 2 inches, or less 2 inches of back spacing, I guess. And this thing is 90 inches wide now. With 90 inches wide, it's got more leverage on the suspension. So, just like when you're using a pry bar or something like that, with the tire sitting farther out there, it's got more leverage. It's pushing up on the suspension, which is bringing the car down, which is essentially changing the angle of my axles. So, what the angle of axles were before the sand tires and wheels, I don't know. But it made me think about some of these videos I'm seeing complaining about this car. In soft mode, they're saying it's a little harsh on the chatter, and then it bottoms out too easy. So on and so forth, especially compared to maybe other cars that are off the showroom floor. Well, Can Am's are known to need some lift on them. I mean, back in 17, 18, 19, I want to say, the cars came with not enough preload. In 20, they started adding some preload to them, so the cars had a little more ride height and didn't bottom out as easy. Well, why would you think that the Maverick R would be any different? So when they're out there driving these cars and they're blowing through the G-outs and the car's bottoming out in comfort mode, and they're complaining about it, well, probably this thing is not dialed in from the factory. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to dial in something. So right now, axle angles, I have 13.6. When I'm running my MTS suspension, which this is all stock right now, I run the axle angles between 17 and 19 degrees. So I'm going to adjust my preload, and consequently with my preload, I may have to do some adjustment on the crossovers, and I'm going to get this thing at a proper ride height, get my axle angles where I need them, so that when I go out and I ride in comfort mode and I hit a minor G out, it doesn't bottom out on me. Overall, I think this is going to be better because the springs are notorious for clapping out, and maybe I'll buy some time before they clap out. So I'll start cranking on this thing, and I'll come back to you and show you what it looks like at a proper ride height. Right now, they're just sitting too low. Okay, so I just spent a bunch of time cranking on those preload nuts, and you know, when you don't have all the right tools, it takes a long time. Fortunately, I do have the lift to take all the weight off, but wanted to show you, ideally between 17 and 19 degrees, and I've got it to 18.1. Happy with that. This is going to help with that extra leverage from the extra wide wheels and tires, to give me some bottom out resistance while in my comfort mode, which seems to be the biggest complaint on the internet right now. So of course they aren't adjusting the preload. Let me show you how I got there. Where I'm measuring, you may not be able to see this, is from the bottom of the reservoir basically to the top of the threads on the shock to the top of the spring is 11 inches. So that'll give you a starting point if you want to do what I'm doing, is you want to adjust your preload to the top of the spring, not the nuts, anything like that, basically the bottom of the one nut. But I went to the top of the spring, I'm at 11 inches on both sides. Those with a keen eye will see that the crossover rings are very close to where my preload is now, so I will have to adjust those. But those I can do with the car sitting on the ground, and that's going to be kind of by feel. That will help drastically with the bottom out control also, because once this spring divider hits the crossover ring, then it takes this spring out of the equation and puts it all on this spring, which gives you a lot more strength, because these two springs together is, let's say if we have 200 and 200, these two springs together is basically 100. Take this one out, then you're all 200 here. That's 200 per inch. What these springs are rated at, I couldn't tell you for sure. Hopefully they're more than 200. So I will adjust those crossovers. What I like is, given this is pretty close, I'll probably go about the middle, and that'll be my starting point. So I'm going to lower this probably a good inch. That way the chop, this will be in play, but anything beyond the chop, this is going to take over, give the bottom out resistance. So that's where we are. When I get to Columbus, I'll dial it in and fine tune it. The front, don't know where I'm going to be on the front just yet. I imagine I'm going to add probably about an inch of preload. I talked about going 11 inches to the top of the spring. I started off at 9 1/4, 3 1/2 in the front, 9 1/4 in the rear. So I added almost 2 inches preload to the back. I don't think that's going to be too much, given I'm running the stock springs. It will settle in and make up for any stiffness I might start out with. Okay, so the back is adjusted, and what I ended up doing was give myself about this much space on the rear crossovers. That space from the top of the spring to the bottom of the crossover is about 3 1/2 inches. So that's just where I started out with. We'll have to adjust on the fly as we go. The front. So the front had 3 3/4 inches of preload. I'm going to get over here where you can see better. So from the top of the threads, or the bottom of the cap here, to the top of the spring, 3 3/4 inches. And what I'm going to do is add some preload to get my angle that I want on the axle. Before I changed anything, I did check the angle on the axle at stock ride height, and it was 13.2 degrees, which I think is the same thing I had on the rear. So again, I want to get this somewhere between 17 and 19 degrees. The rear, I ended up adding 1 3/4 of preload to get myself right at 18 degrees. The front, I'm going to add about 1 1/4 of preload. So what that's going to put me at is 5 inches from the top of the shock body to the top of the spring. I got to come down to 5 inches. Right now it's at 3 3/4. So 1 1/4 we're going to add. Incidentally, for those who didn't know, because of the color we have here, the aluminum knuckles, the A-arms are actually steel. So from the appearance, you would have seen easily to assume that this is aluminum, but it's not. It's steel. So how am I adding preload? First, I thought about taking the shocks off, which is pretty straightforward. The top now has a plug to unplug the wire. The bottom still has the 2 Allens to undo the wire down there. But once the shock is unbolted, how am I going to get it out? I don't know if it's going to drop out from the bottom or pull out from the top, which means I have to pull out some plastic. But what I decided to do is go ahead and try to compress the spring to make it easier. The passenger side is already done. Filming the driver's side for you so you see how I did it. What I got is some Harbor Freight ratchet straps. And what's kind of key is the type of hook that it's got there. So what I've done is on the short side, it's got about a 8-inch lead or so. I need to eliminate as much of that lead as possible. So I ran it up over the coil here and back down again to shorten this space. And then the bottom, I was just able to do that. So I've got one on one side, I'm going to add one to the other side, and it seems to be the trick to getting that spring compressed. And this is the Harbor Freight package that ratchet strap comes in. I already had one, had to go buy another one. For whatever reason, I only had one. So I'll get this put on and we'll compress the spring. Okay, I'm going to try to record and show you how I got this ratchet strap situated in there. Don't know how much you're going to be able to see. So the way this hook is, it allows me to go up over the coil and back down again. Other types of hooks I wasn't able to do that with. And I can either run it straight back out here, twist it, and then lock it down, or I could have done it on the inside. I don't mind doing it this way because it kind of locks the coil, locks it in place where it needs to be. Then the bottom side, I'm just going to grab it here as low as I can, and then see if I can't get this ratcheted. Okay. All right. I'm getting there. Okay, with that much coil compressed, maybe we'll get some slop in there to where I can start cranking it down. Okay, I got my preload done, front and rear. Just kind of finishing up on the front here. I told you I started off with 13.2 degrees, and now I'm at 17.6. That's right where I want to be. And just for a little review, the way I got there. Hope you guys can see this. From the top of the threads, which is right here, the cap of the shock, you might say, from this bottom edge right here to the top of the spring itself, right there, I went 5 inches on the front. And for the crossover, I went from the top of the spring to the bottom of the crossover, 3 inches. 5 inches preload overall, and I did 3 inches from the top of the spring to the bottom of the crossover. And that's going to be my starting point. In the rear, as a reminder, I went from the top of the threads up there, which is the bottom of that housing, to the top of the spring. I went 11 inches. From the top of the spring to the bottom of the crossover, I went 3.5. So 11 inches for the preload, 3.5 for the crossover. Again, that's just a starting point. What did that get me? That got me 17.6 degrees axle angle on the front and 18.1 degree axle angle on the rear. That's a great starting point. I do believe it needed this preload because of the extra width of the car, has more leverage on it. Plus, I mean, that's just a thing you got to do to these Can Ams. Everybody's done it on the X3s. You just know out of the box the springs are going to settle and it's going to start to clap out on you. And then you get people reviewing these things that they're crap, that they bottom out and whatever else. So this is a good starting point. I totally expect these springs will probably clap out in the future and they'll keep settling and the car keep going down. That'll be the time that I'll do the full shock tune. Right now, of course, I have a favorite, the MTS. Those guys, man, great customer service. and I think this thing's just going to be dynamite after they get done with it. But until then, we got the preload done. Okay, just to give you a final wide shot here out in the open, so you can see what the preload did for the car. Definitely improved its stance. The thing is sitting up like a sandrail now. Obviously, it's a bigger car than the X3s. It's just pretty awesome looking. The Price Design wheels are just incredible. I know you're going to ask, so I'm going to give you a couple of measurements here. Okay, get a measurement for you here. This is again 34-inch sand tires. What the preload done? I'm about 20 1/4 inches clearance here. Go in the middle of the car, and about 19 1/2 inches of clearance in the middle of the car. And in the back of the car, we are at 18 3/4. So I hope this helped you guys that are wanting to do some preload in your car. I'm just sharing my experience where I ended up at, based upon what my target of 17 to 19 degrees, or call it 18 degrees of axle angle. I think that's a great starting point for anybody with a stock car. If you get your shocks done by any of the reputable companies, I suggest you follow what they tell you to do. But on your stock car, I think this is a good starting point. Remember, the crossover rings, that's the starting point. That's going to be adjusted to, you're going to lower it down if you want the bottom out resistance to kick in sooner, or raise it up if you feel like you're against the bottom out. When I say bottom out, I'm talking about the primary spring taking over. If you feel like you're against that too much. So hope this videos are helping you guys. Appreciate if you guys could help out the channel a little bit. Give us a like, leave me some comments. Pretty responsive on answering the questions on there, and please subscribe. And if you really like it, share it with somebody else. Maybe they can subscribe. Someday I'll get some gas money out of this. So thanks again, guys. Bye.